What's it like to live in the world's most dangerous prison? These notorious facilities are designed to break you, housing the most violent criminals on Earth. Today, we'll take you inside the most brutal, inescapable prisons you could ever imagine. Welcome to Truth and Travels. In today's video, we're diving deep into the darkest, most dangerous prisons on Earth. From solitary confinement to terrifying escape attempts, these places are more brutal than you could ever imagine. At SO, buckle up, because this is going to be one intense journey. Prisons across the globe are meant to serve as punishment, but some are more than just a place of confinement. They are living nightmares. Overcrowding, violence, and inhumane conditions plague the most notorious jails on Earth. Today, we'll look at these hellish places where criminals live out their days, isolated from the world, and sometimes from humanity itself. 1. ADX Florence, the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Located in Colorado, USA, ADX Florence is one of the most secure prisons in the world. It's home to some of the most dangerous criminals, and its reputation as the Alcatraz of the Rockies stems from its extreme isolation practices. Inmates here are confined to small, windowless cells for 23 hours a day. Famous criminals like Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, and Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, the Boston Marathon bomber, are among those locked away here. The prison's design is made to ensure no inmate can escape or make contact with the outside world. 2. La Santé Prison, France. Next, we travel to Paris, France, to one of Europe's most dangerous prisons, La Santé. This prison has housed notorious criminals like terrorists and gang leaders, but it's also infamous for its overcrowding, appalling conditions, and constant violence. La Santé has been criticized for its overpopulation. Many prisoners are living in cells designed for fewer inmates, leading to horrific conditions. Inmates live in cramped spaces with little access to basic resources. The chaos is fueled by high tensions and the fact that even the guards are often outnumbered. Key points. Overcrowding. Prison designed for 700 holds over 1,300 inmates. Frequent riots, fights, and escapes. Poor conditions. Lack of sanitation, minimal resources. 3. San Quentin, United States. One of the oldest and most notorious prisons in the United States. San Quentin is located in California. It's been the home of many infamous criminals, including Charles Manson and Scott Peterson. San Quentin holds more than 3,500 inmates, many of whom are incarcerated for violent crimes. One of its darkest features is a death row, where prisoners await execution. However, it's also a hotbed for prison gangs like the Aryan Brotherhood and Black Guerrilla Family, which have immense control inside the facility. Key points. History. A prison for over 150 years, housing violent criminals. The death row and infamous executions. Influence of gangs within the prison. Controlling prison life. 4. Black Dolphin Prison, Russia. In Russia, there's a prison so notorious, it's called Black Dolphin. Located in the Ural Mountains, it's a high-security facility designed to house the country's most violent criminals, terrorists, serial killers, and cannibals. The conditions inside Black Dolphin are unimaginable. Prisoners are shackled at all times, and they live in constant solitary confinement with no contact with other inmates. The guards here are heavily armed, and the prison's design ensures that escapes are virtually impossible. Key points. Prisoners are shackled 24/7. Solitary confinement. No contact with other prisoners. Home to serial killers, terrorists, and cannibals. The prisoners here are shackled at all times, with chains around their wrists, waist, and ankles. When they're moved, they're blindfolded to prevent them from knowing the layout of the prison. They never know what's coming next, and neither do we. Each cell is designed to break the spirit of the inmates. The walls are cold. The space is minimal, and the psychological toll is unimaginable. Some of the most notorious criminals in Russia's history are housed here. Among them are serial killers, terrorists, and even former military personnel responsible for heinous acts. One of the most infamous inmates is Sergei K., a serial killer responsible for the deaths of over 30 women. He was sentenced to life without parole. But even more chilling are the stories of those who have committed acts so violent they make the average criminal pale in comparison. Despite the rigorous security, there have been a few attempts to escape over the years, but all have been unsuccessful. The last attempt was in 2000 when a group of inmates tried to break out, but the prison's tight security and constant surveillance made it impossible for them to succeed. The mental toll of living in Black Dolphin is overwhelming. Prisoners here spend years in complete isolation, with no chance for rehabilitation or meaningful contact. The bleak, solitary existence leads to severe psychological effects, depression, anxiety, and in some cases, complete mental breakdowns. While they may have committed unthinkable crimes, the conditions at Black Dolphin turn even the toughest criminals into shadows of who they once were. 5. Rikers Island, United States. Located in New York City, Rikers Island is one of the most infamous prisons in the United States. Known for its severe overcrowding, violence, and corruption, Rikers has become a symbol of everything that's wrong with the prison system. Here, prisoners face constant danger, not just from other inmates, but also from corrupt guards. Over the years, there have been countless reports of abuse, neglect, and mistreatment, making Rikers one of the most dangerous places for both inmates and staff. Key points: overcrowding in understaffed facilities, high levels of violence, corruption, and abuse, public criticism, and calls for Rikers closure. Rikers Island has long been one of the most notorious jails in the United States. Known for violence, corruption, and overcrowding, Rikers has a dark and unsettling history that continues to haunt the American justice system today. Rikers Island was first used as a prison in 1932, but it wasn't until the 1970s that it became a symbol of the American jail system. What started as a small facility for men awaiting trial or serving short sentences quickly grew into one of the largest jails in the world. Today, Rikers Island houses around 5,000 inmates at any given time, and despite its infamy, it still holds individuals awaiting trial, juveniles, and even women. Many inmates here serve sentences of a few months or even weeks, but the conditions they face can be far worse than any prison sentence should be. The conditions on Rikers Island are notoriously brutal. Overcrowding is a constant issue, with cells that are often too small for the number of inmates housed in them. Violence, both between prisoners and from guards, is rampant. Reports of abuse and misconduct by correctional officers have plagued the facility for decades. Stories of beating, psychological abuse, and unchecked power have led to multiple investigations and lawsuits. In fact, Rikers Island has become a symbol of everything that's wrong with the American prison system, from mistreatment of inmates to a lack of proper rehabilitation programs. But the worst part? The violence isn't just confined to inmates. For years, Rikers Island has been infamous for cases of brutality inflicted by the very officers meant to maintain order. Inmates at Rikers face more than just physical punishment. They face psychological trauma as well. The constant threat of violence, both from fellow prisoners and guards, combined with the lack of mental health care, leaves many inmates mentally scarred. Solitary confinement, a practice still used at Rikers Island, can leave individuals isolated for days, weeks, or even months at a time. These long periods of isolation can lead to severe psychological effects, including depression, anxiety, and hallucinations. In recent years, there's been growing pressure to close Rikers Island for good. Activists, former inmates, and city leaders have called for an end to brutality that has defined the jail for decades. The movement to close Rikers Island has gained momentum, with many people pushing for reform of the entire criminal justice system. Throughout its history, Rikers Island has housed many high-profile inmates, including celebrities, political figures, and notorious criminals. One of the most famous cases was that of rapper A$AP Rocky, who spent a brief time in the facility in 2019 after a fight broke out during his tour in Sweden. Rikers Island is a place of fear, brutality, and suffering. It has become a symbol of what happens when a prison system prioritizes punishment over rehabilitation. As the battle for reform continues, the future of Rikers remains uncertain. 6. The Island of the Damned. Indonesia's most dangerous prison deep in the jungle of Indonesia, there exists a prison so isolated, so feared, that it is known only as the Island of the Damned. Hidden far from civilization, this prison holds some of the most dangerous criminals in Southeast Asia. With no easy access, escape is nearly impossible, and life inside is pure torment. The Island of the Damned is located in the Banda Sea of Indonesia. This small, remote island is surrounded by treacherous waters and dense jungles, making it nearly impossible for inmates to escape. The isolation of this prison serves as a constant reminder to those inside. Freedom is out of reach. Built in the early 1900s, this facility was originally a place to isolate Indonesia's most dangerous criminals and keep them far from the mainland. The prison's remoteness means that not only is escape virtually impossible, but even a rescue operation would be incredibly difficult. The island's location, surrounded by towering walls and steep cliffs, ensures that those imprisoned here will never see the outside world again. Inside the prison, the conditions are brutal. The inmates housed here are among the most violent criminals in Indonesia, serial killers, terrorists, and gang members. This facility is not for the faint of heart. With no chance of parole, many prisoners are sentenced to life in isolation, confined to small, windowless cells. The prison is known for its harsh treatment of inmates. Prisoners are subjected to physical punishment, forced labor, and near-total isolation. Guards patrol the facility 24/7, and any sign of rebellion is met with swift, brutal retaliation. There are no second chances here. The conditions inside the Island of the Damned are enough to break even the toughest individuals. Overcrowding, lack of basic sanitation, and insufficient food make daily life a constant struggle. Inmates spend most of their time in solitary confinement or working under grueling conditions. With limited access to medical care, mental health issues among inmates are widespread. Many prisoners here are pushed to the brink of madness, driven by the constant stress, lack of sleep, and isolation. Yet, for those who endure, it's not just a fear of punishment that haunts them. It's the knowledge that they may never leave. Solitary confinement is one of the most feared aspects of life on the Island of the Damned. Inmates are often locked away for weeks, sometimes months, in tiny cells with no contact with other prisoners or the outside world. The Island of the Damned houses some of the most dangerous criminals in Southeast Asia. One of the most infamous cases is that of Abu Bakr Bashir, a notorious terrorist linked to the 2002 Bali bombings, who was once held here before being moved to a different facility. There are also numerous gang leaders and serial killers who have made their way to this remote island. For them, prison isn't just a punishment. It's a permanent sentence to solitude and suffering. Cut to a generic shot of prison bars closing, symbolizing the finality of life in the facility. Known by locals and prisoners alike as the Island of the Damned, this prison has a reputation for being a place of extreme fear and isolation. The legend of the island has only grown over the years, with rumors of hauntings, strange occurrences, and unexplainable events among the inmates and staff. For those who are sent here, there is no escape from the psychological torment. Even the most hardened criminals live in constant dread, knowing that their days are spent behind thick stone walls and miles from any chance of rescue. The Island of the Damned is not just a prison. It's a testament to the extremes that humanity can go to in order to control its most dangerous individuals. For those sentenced to live and die here, freedom is a distant dream. And for the rest of the world, it's a chilling reminder of the darkness that exists within these walls. 7. Carandiru Penitentiary, Brazil. In the heart of Sao Paulo, Brazil, stood a prison that earned a notorious reputation for overcrowding, violence, and tragedy. Carandiru Penitentiary, once the largest and most feared facility in Brazil, is no more, but its dark legacy still lingers. Carandiru was built in 1920, originally designed to hold just 3,000 inmates. But by the 1990s, the prison was home to more than 8,000 men, far exceeding its capacity. The overcrowding was so severe that it became a breeding ground for violence, disease, and unrest. Inmates lived in horrifying conditions, with minimal access to health care, sanitation, and food. The prison became a microcosm of Brazil's wider issues, where inequality and corruption were reflected behind bars. But the darkest chapter of Carandiru's history occurred on October 2nd, 1992. A prison riot broke out in the facility's Pavilion 9, sparked by tensions between inmates and guards. What followed would shock the world. The Brazilian military police responded with overwhelming force. In the chaos, 111 inmates were killed, most of them executed by the police in cold blood. The massacre, one of the deadliest incidents in Brazilian prison history, was a brutal display of state violence against prisoners. The massacre's legacy remains a haunting reminder of the state's failure to reform the prison system and the horrifying extremes taken to quell rebellion. Carandiru Penitentiary was finally shut down in 2002 and demolished shortly after. But its impact lingers, as the Carandiru Massacre became a symbol of Brazil's ongoing issues with corruption, human rights abuses, and prison overcrowding. Though Carandiru no longer exists, the stories of those who suffered and died within its walls continue to echo. Today, the Brazilian government is forced to confront its prison system's legacy, one that has left thousands behind bars, forgotten and abandoned. Carandiru's story is one of both tragedy and transformation, where a broken system was exposed and a nation was forced to look at its darkest truths. While the prison may be gone, its legacy remains a painful chapter in Brazil's history. These prisons represent the extreme side of human society, places that strip people of their rights, humanity, and sometimes their very lives. If there's one thing these prisons show us, it's how deeply the justice system can shape the fate of those behind bars. Some prisons are meant to break you. Thank you for watching. To learn more about the world's most notorious prisons and their hidden histories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell for more.